The celebrated professor would later call it a clerical fluke. But the truth began with a splintered desk and a tired woman who refused to look away. When Professor Corbin Hale told the humble librarian to leave the real research to scholars, he could not imagine that a loosened strip of wood beneath her fingertips would become the hinge of his most public lesson in humility. Elena Marlowe closed the reading room for the night. Dust hung in the cone of her desk lamp. The old mahogany work table, the one marked for disposal, wobbled when she nudged it. She pressed her palm to the scarred surface and felt the lightest give, a whisper of movement. Not the leg, a panel, the drawer that shouldn't exist. He'd set it in front of donors that afternoon. Miss Marlowe keeps everything orderly, vital work in its way. But discovery requires more than tidiness. Laughter followed on cue. Elena's smile stayed professional. Inwardly, it had bitten. She angled the lamp low and tested the seam with a bookbinder's bone folder. The edge lifted half a fingernail and a cold draft slipped from within. Metal and old ink. Careful, she told herself, the word silent but firm, the way her father used to coach her before puzzle tournaments. It wasn't in her job description to discover anything. Process, catalog, preserve. That was the liturgy of her days. Yet she kept a private ritual after hours, tracing monkish letter forms until the loops and thorns lived in her wrist, teaching her eye to see the difference between affectation and age. During the lockdown years, she had even audited one of Hale's evening classes under an alias, because she couldn't bear the smirk he wore when he encouraged support staff. He had once returned her graduate application with a single, neat sentence. Clerical competence is not scholarship. The memory rose now, not as shame, but as flint. She slid the folder deeper, levered gently, and the wood sighed open. A narrow compartment ran the length of the desk. Inside lay an oilskin bundle, cords dark with age, and a shallow tin vial with a fractured cork. The smell of iron and lavender rose, oddly sweet, as if someone had tried to keep moths from eating the past. If I report this now, he'll take it from me, she thought. The thought sounded like pride, yet felt like survival. She lifted the bundle. The oilskin stuck, then peeled away in whispering layers. Beneath it lay a sheet of stiff paper, browned at the edges and smooth at the center, as if a palm had pressed it 1,000 times. Symbols marked the surface, deliberate, spare. A cross flared from one margin, not the rounded Latin kind, but a severe geometry, its arms widening before the tips bit inward like teeth. She did not say the name aloud, but the word bloomed anyway. Templar. Don't get carried away, she whispered. A habit formed to keep her pulse from outrunning her judgment. Training answered. The ink smelled of oak gall. The hands suggested late medieval. The compass points hidden in the cross's serifs were too precise to be decorative, and their faint, almost erased numerals salted through the margin out of sequence, as if daring a reader to notice. Her phone stayed in her pocket. She didn't trust it tonight. Instead, she drew the blinds, set the parchment on unbleached paper, and angled the lamp in raking light. Faint indentations rippled across the sheet, ghost letters pressed by a hard nib. Whoever wrote this pressed fiercely, and the page kept the memory. Elena had learned raking light from a conservator who let her sit in on repairs for coffee. She learned ciphers from her father, a radio hobbyist who loved number stations and taught her that secrets are patterns with bad manners. After he died, she kept listening, kept solving, because solving felt like a way to hear him again. That was her hidden skill. Not a title or a degree, but a stubborn intimacy with concealed structures others overlooked. A floorboard creaked in the corridor. She smiled when the motion sensor failed to trigger. The building was empty, but the sound conjured Hale's benevolent eyebrow, the smile he reserved for the over-eager. You'll keep the place tidy, he had told the donors, so that when the real work arrives, we're ready. Real work, she thought now, tracing the faint tracks of an invisible hand. Define real. If you're enjoying this story of justice and hidden strength, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple act of prejudice turned into the most valuable lesson of Professor Corbin Hale's life. She let her eyes relax until negative spaces swam forward. A ladder of tiny dots emerged along one arm of the cross, then a second ladder offset by one rung. A cipher scaffold. Her breath hitched. The tin vial winked in the lamplight. Inside lay grains of something black and crystalline. She didn't open it, not yet. The desk sighed as the building settled. A sound like a door deciding whether to close. Elena slid the compartment back into place, shut off the overheads, and left only the lamp. She wrapped the parchment again, not to hide it but to honor it, and stood very still, listening. In the quiet she recognized it. Not fear, not defiance, anticipation. The first stone had moved. Something beneath the library felt awake and patient, as if waiting for her to ask the right question. And she would ask it. She turned the key in the reading room door and gathered her coat, the oilskin bundle cradled in both hands. Behind the glass, the desk looked ordinary again. Secret returned to its seam, but the symbol had already wheeled in her mind, aligning with a parish sketch she'd shelved last winter. A small church whose lintel bore the same severe cross. She did not look back. She knew where she would go in the morning. By morning the city wore a thin skin of rain, and the library's stone steps exhaled a mineral chill as she let herself in early. The security lights clicked off in sequence, little smothered stars. She did not turn on the overheads in the reading room, only the lamp. Swung low, a moon over a private tide. The oilskin bundle lay where she'd left it, wrapped again as if it were a vow. She untied it with the same respect a nurse gives a stitch. Under raking light, the ink woke. The cross's flared arms threw tiny shadows that hadn't been visible at midnight. The margin numerals scattered like dropped bread, resolved into a pattern when she measured the distances with a thread and 2 paper clips. Every third numeral sat astride an invisible grid. A hand that likes order, she thought, pleased and wary. Someone wanted to be found by someone patient. Don't romanticize it. Verify it, she told herself. The conservator's mantra steadied her, the one she learned while she traded coffee for lessons. Elena slipped a fresh sheet of translucent mylar over the parchment and, instead of touching ink, traced only negative space, where the pen had not gone, where the pressure had bit, but the pigment had failed. The indentations sang a second melody. Letters emerged in fragments. L_S_G_A_D, like a face seen in rain-blurred glass. Not yet, not yet. She studied the paper itself. A watermark ghosted across the sheet. A mill wheel, circled by a narrow band, intersected by 2 short strokes that made a small, severe cross. Not the printer's ornament, she first assumed. Her memory reached backward to a carton she'd accessioned in winter. Parish architectural sketches from a deconsecrated church, St. Severin's. The lintel in one drawing had borne that same uncompromising cross, its arms widening before they pinched to points. The desk had arrived from that estate sale too, a footnote in a shipping log she could picture like a negative. Lot 17. B. Rectory Furnishings. St. Severin's Oratory. Wolcott Street. Revelation clicked into place, with the cool certainty of a cabinet latch. The desk and the page were family. A throat cleared at the door. Early start, Miss Marlowe? Marta, from Collections, leaned in, her badge clipping light. Heads up, the surplus haulers are finally coming for that old mahogany. 5 p.m. I need your sign-off. She frowned past the lamp. You look like you've seen a ghost. Just dust, Elena said, sliding the mylar aside, palms flat over the oilskin, as if warming them. I'll have the paperwork ready. Her voice sounded natural. Inside, 2 clocks ran in opposition. One counting down to 5 o'clock, one counting up to whatever this was. When Marta left, Elena opened the desk's hidden panel again to understand its mechanics. The strip of wood had been shaved on a bias, so a downward press released a pin no wider than a matchstick. Not accidental. She photographed only the wood, not the parchment, and only on her museum-issue camera that never touched the cloud. The decision felt less like paranoia than stewardship. "You should report this. It's not yours," said the careful voice that had kept her employed in a world that preferred titles to talent. Then another voice, quieter but older, answered from a place beside her childhood desk, where her father once sat with a pencil behind his ear. "If you give it to someone who doesn't love it, you will lose it." She had learned that the week she returned a misattributed folio to the archive anonymously, because Hale had been drunk on donor applause, and she couldn't bear to see him tie his name to a discovery he hadn't made. The head of special collections found it on a cart and called it a rediscovery. He thanked Hale publicly. She breathed once, twice. "Not this time," she said aloud, and the room accepted it. Elena moved to the accession logs. There it was, in a faded hand that still carried the impatience of an intern. Severin's rectory old desks, too. The note below was stranger. Found behind choir stalls during demolition. Keys not included. Her mind played it forward. A rectory, a hidden panel, a parish that was once a node in a network of families whose great-grandparents had carried European relics like pocket saints. St. Severin's had been recorded as a Templar chapel in a 19th-century romantic history that serious scholars dismissed. But sometimes, she knew, romance had better memory than scholarship. The tin vial on her desk looked blacker in daylight. Lampblack and iron salts? Pounce? She did not open it. There were safe ways. She dipped a brush in distilled water and skimmed the air above the parchment to raise no swells. Then, with a soft graphite stick on fresh paper, she took a light rubbing of the mylar's indentations. More letters surrendered themselves BLOO before breaking into silence again. As if the page had exhaled and then refused to speak, a shiver ran over her forearms that wasn't from the cold. She drafted an email to Hale, neutral, almost bland, requesting your expert opinion on a watermark and provenance linkage between St. Severin's furniture lot and a late medieval sheet recovered from same. Would value a brief consult. She did not attach images of the cipher. She attached the watermark, the shipping note. She had learned to set bait that appealed to his appetite, provenance, and credit. At his townhouse across the river, Hale read her message, while stirring his espresso with a narrow gold spoon he insisted had belonged to a Venetian librarian. He smirked, then frowned, then smiled again as donors' names rotated like saints in a litany. Useful, he thought. Clerkly diligence. Finally in service of something publishable. He typed, "Of course. Bring it by this afternoon. We'll make quick work of it." Back in the reading room, Elena's phone buzzed. She read his reply twice, felt the old bruise speak, and closed her eyes. This is the right move, she told herself, not as apology but as strategy. Let him underestimate you. Let him open the wrong door first. At noon, church bells from a block away tolled like measured breaths. Elena slid the parchment into an archival folder, wrapped the oilskin around it, and returned the panel to its notch. She signed Marta's clearance form with a hand that did not tremble and slipped the folder into her satchel. When she stepped into the corridor toward Hale's office, the lamp's glow fell behind her like a tide going out, leaving wet sand and the faint impression of a cross. Hale's office smelled faintly of bergamot and leather polish, the kind of scent that announced its owner before he spoke. A wall of first editions surveyed the room like jurors. A glass case displayed a few, too prominent fragments, as if scholarship were a museum of himself. Elena stood with her satchel clasped in both hands and placed the archival folder oilskin inside on the felt blotter. Hale skimmed her email printout, then the watermark photo. "St. Severin's," he said, keeping his voice dry. "Romantic local lore. Templar, if you ask the parish brochures." He let the last word fall like a coin into a shallow fountain. His eyes flicked to the folder. "And this would be the late medieval sheet you mentioned." "It would," Elena said. "And the desk that hid it, shipped from the same rectory lot." He unlaced the cord and unfolded the oilskin with a gentleness that surprised even him. The parchment slid into the light. The cross's severe arms held his gaze for a breath longer than he wanted to admit. Not decorative, he thought. A scaffold, if one were fanciful. His tongue tasted copper. Don't show it. Keep your face. Aloud, he chuckled. Charming? I've seen better tourist reproductions on the Quai Voltaire. Elena did not flinch. Oak gall, late medieval hand. Pressure indentations consistent with hard nib writing. There's also a mill wheel watermark, intersected by a cross, the same mark, stamped in St. Severin's parish sketches. Marks are cheap, he said, enjoying the rhythm of dismissal because it steadied the faster drum under his ribs. Clerical curios can look like scholarship if you're very eager. He tilted the lamp. The tiny ladder of dots winked along the crossbar, 1, 2, 3, offset. He felt a nerve flicker at the base of his skull. I've seen that alignment. Catalog 14b. Berard's Inventory of Ciphers. He reached for boredom the way a drowning man reaches for a dock. If you want to practice codicology, Miss Marlowe, take a class that suits your strengths. The word chews its cruelty with practiced ease. Elena heard it and filed it. She had long ago learned to sheath the hurt, so the blade dulled. He's afraid of it, she thought, surprised that the idea arrived as compassion before it hardened into caution. Chain of custody, she said evenly, as if narrating a policy manual. If Special Collections accepts the item, I'll log the transfer and the secure locker location. You'll sign as consulting scholar, not primary discoverer. Provenance remains with the institution. He smiled without the top half of his face. You have a tidy way with forms. Behind the smile, his mind sprinted to the ledgers of his professional debts. The palimpsest fiasco 3 years ago now, when a graduate student had embarrassed him with a better eye and a blog post, was still a bruise he powder-coated with charm. The retraction had not killed him, but it had made donors cautious. He needed something that could raise the dead version of himself. This page, if genuine, could do it. He imagined a symposium, a monograph, a caption that returned the word authority to his biography. Let's be sensible, he said, voice turning velvet. You've done well to spot a curiosity. Now entrust it to someone equipped to authenticate it properly. I'll take it to the lab, run the tests, and naturally include you in the acknowledgments. Acknowledgments. The word rang like a bell made of tin. Elena set her fingertips on the folder's corner and did not move them. We can run tests together, here, after I complete intake. She heard her father's voice as if he were standing at her left shoulder. Don't give your puzzle away before you're finished reading it. Hale leaned back, temple against leather. You mistake what's at stake. If this is a forgery, your enthusiasm has wasted an afternoon. If it's real, delay is malpractice. He reached to slide the parchment toward himself. Not a grab. A nudge as if touching the future more than the page. She let the folder stay still. Then we shouldn't delay the paperwork. A calculation crossed his face like a cloud shadow. He pressed the intercom. Marta? Be a dear and tell facilities. The surplus desk in Reading 3 is to be redirected, yes, now to conservation. I'll sign the reassignment order. Elena's stomach chilled. That desk is on today's haul. It's already logged for disposal. Then we'll unlog it, he said, the smile returning. Sometimes scholarship requires a little improvisation. He wants the panel, she thought, not just the page. He wants the mechanism, the context, the narrative that makes men write checks. She slid the parchment back into the oilskin and tied the cord. I'll take this to Special Collections. You can meet me there with your reassignment order, and we'll proceed under glass. Her voice sounded very calm. Beneath it, a line of heat unwound. You will not erase me with a footnote. Hale stood, the room adjusting to his full height like a stage light finding its lead. Miss Marlowe, he said, the benevolent tone returning as if he could staple it to the moment. Don't mistake custodianship for authorship. Hand it over. No, came the word, not spoken but firm, and it surprised her by how natural it felt in her mouth. Chain of custody, she repeated. In 5 minutes I'll be logging it. He watched her go, the satchel against her hip like a sealed verdict. When the door eased shut, his smile collapsed. He pulled his phone and typed a message to a donor who liked his discoveries messy and exclusive. Might have something. Medieval. Possible Templar linkage. Quiet viewing later. He sent a second to facilities, adding urgency. To Marta, the same. Then he reached for Berard's catalog on the shelf and opened to the plate he remembered. There, in crisp relief, ran the same dotted ladder. Damn, he said softly, not with pleasure. If this was what he thought, he would have to take it before she learned how to read it. Elena's apartment smelled faintly of tea and linen. The streets outside hummed with the midday cadence of the city, but inside, a hush settled around her work table. She spread the parchment once more, pulling the oilskin back like a curtain unveiling a stage. Light slanted through the blinds, sharp and narrow, cutting across the faint indentations, making them jump in relief. Her pulse synchronized with the symbols. The blood is guarded, she whispered under her breath, reading aloud the fragment that had surfaced in the last tracing. The phrase was cryptic yet unmistakable. Medieval, yes, but ritualistic. The words clutched at memory's edge, dredging tales her father used to tell her, the Knights Templar safeguarding secrets too dangerous for ordinary knowledge. Tales adults dismissed as legend. Yet here was physical proof, pressed into cellulose and time. A cipher demanding attention. She laid out graph paper and began aligning the dots. The ladder of numerals, the third, offset by 1, became a coordinate system. Every line, every space, every shadow pointed somewhere. It wasn't art. It was a map. A puzzle demanding patience, observation, and respect. Elena had always excelled at patterns that others dismissed as trivial. Her father had nurtured that skill, teaching her to see where others only looked. This time, it was not just a hobby, it was survival. A knock at the door made her start. She masked her surprise, sliding the parchment partially under a stack of reference texts. "Coming," she called. It was her neighbor, a quiet woman who taught weaving in a nearby studio. "Coffee?" the neighbor asked, holding a mug as if presenting a peace offering. Elena shook her head, smiling faintly. "I have work," she replied. The neighbor nodded, leaving without pressing. Alone again, she allowed herself to lean back, tracing the air above the symbols with her eyes, imagining the hand that wrote them. Precision, purpose, and a certain elegance someone had meant for this to endure, yet remain hidden. The notion thrilled her. The thrill was careful, controlled. She did not yet allow joy to unguard her mind. She remembered the professor's smirk, the dismissal in his voice. His arrogance was predictable, a predictable tide against which she had learned to row silently. Yet she recognized the danger he now posed. Hale understood provenance, networks, and leverage. He would see the latter, the pattern, and instantly grasp its significance, or so she feared. Not for curiosity, not for scholarship, but for gain. She shivered and set the mylar aside. At her small writing desk, Elena began a methodical decoding. Using the numerals as coordinates, she charted letters across grids, aligning indentations with corresponding symbols. Hours passed, punctuated only by sips of tea and the scratch of pencil on paper. Slowly, fragments became coherent phrases. Mentions of lineage, of hidden chambers beneath consecrated ground. References to relics moved under cloak of night. The pieces formed a story, one that connected centuries of secret custodians. She paused, realizing she held knowledge few could understand, fewer could act upon. A moral weight settled on her shoulders, both exhilarating and daunting. The room seemed to contract around the parchment, around her resolve. She understood that revealing this prematurely could bring chaos or worse, exploitation. A letter slid beneath her door. No stamp, no signature. She picked it up, eyes widening. Inside was a single line of ink, written in precise medieval calligraphy. Trust is the key, patience the lock. Her heartbeat quickened. Someone else knew the significance. Someone watched. The room darkened as clouds passed outside, leaving shadows that made the indentations seem to move. Elena leaned closer, feeling a thrill that was part fear, part anticipation. Her father's lessons, her quiet years of pattern recognition, the patience of countless nights in libraries, it all converged here. The cipher had begun to awaken, and so had her resolve. She whispered to herself, voice steady, I will uncover the truth, not for glory, but for justice, for knowledge that must be safeguarded. And with that, Elena set the oilskin aside, aligning the parchment perfectly under the lamp, preparing for the deeper work. The Templar code was no longer just symbols on paper. It was a calling, one that demanded cunning, patience, and unwavering focus. The steps to the old church were slick with morning rain, each tread sending echoes through the narrow alley that ran between brick walls slick with moss. Elena paused at the wrought iron gate, gloved fingers tracing the intricate loops of its design. St. Severin's, or what remained, had been deconsecrated decades ago. Its nave shuttered, the choir windows blocked by plywood. Yet she knew the basement still existed, a stone crawlspace beneath the altar, untouched and forgotten. The parchment guided her, each symbol and ladder of dots aligning with architectural oddities in her sketches. One corner of the rectory's floor plan, originally dismissed as a storage closet, now corresponded to a narrowing hallway she recognized beneath the main hall. The cross on the parchment, when overlaid against the lintel sketch, pointed directly to a hidden threshold, a door that had likely remained sealed since the Templars' influence waned. Elena crouched, tracing the edge of the stone door embedded into the basement wall. Faint carvings matched the severe cross, confirming her suspicions. She pressed her palms against the cold stone, feeling the subtle vibrations, the resonance of centuries. The first tests of patience had paid off. The placement, the alignments, the grid of symbols, they were not ornamental. They were instructions. She knelt, inspecting the edges. Dust collected in a narrow groove suggested frictionless movement in the past. Something had been designed to open smoothly. A careful knock revealed hollow tones, variations in sound that hinted at cavities behind. She set to work, studying the sequence of the numerals against the lock structure. Precision and persistence. Lessons inherited, honed, perfected. Every choice mattered. Hours slipped past, unnoticed. The gray daylight waned as she carefully inserted wedges, tapping at sequences dictated by her decoding of the ladder. Each click resonated through the basement like the measured heartbeat of the building itself. Finally, a muted groan, a small hiss of air escaping from centuries-old seals, and the stone door yielded. Inside, the chamber was tight, dust motes dancing like specters in the weak shaft of light from her lantern. Stone shelves lined the walls, carved by hands long gone, bearing containers wrapped in oilskin, cords knotted in the patterns she had memorized from the parchment. A pedestal in the center bore a small, iron-bound book, its cover etched with the same severe cross. The air smelled of iron, parchment, and time. Elena's breath caught. Here lay the relics, the preserved objects, the records of a secret that the Templars had guarded across centuries. She reached for the book with reverence, tracing the etched symbols with her fingertips. Each movement carried the weight of history, yet the thrill of discovery was tempered by caution. The parchment's phrase repeated in her mind. The blood is guarded. Guardianship was responsibility. A sudden shift in shadows drew her gaze to the corner of the chamber. Someone had followed her. She wasn't alone. The professor's face emerged from the dim light, mask half smile, eyes sharp. Impressive, he said, voice low, almost a growl. But you overstep when you trespass alone. Elena's heart thudded. She had anticipated him underestimating her, yet the immediacy of his presence, the authority he wielded with a mere step forward, tested her resolve. I am here as custodian, she said steadily. Not intruder, not competitor, custodian. Hale's gaze traveled over the relics, then rested on her. The smirk was gone, replaced by something that acknowledged her cleverness, her persistence. Yet the shadow of betrayal lingered. He had intended to seize the discoveries, claiming their significance for his own acclaim. Elena stood firm, hands steady, mind aligned with centuries of Templar foresight. Custodianship was more than access, it was judgment. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof, a metronome to her thoughts. She realized that the chamber itself was a testament not only to hidden knowledge, but to vigilance, patience, and moral responsibility. To uncover the secrets was one thing, to protect them, another entirely. And in this chamber, under layers of history, Elena's hidden strengths, the quiet skills honed in libraries, the lessons of her father, her unyielding patience had brought her to the precipice of truth. The professor's footsteps were careful, measured, but Elena sensed the shift immediately, a tension in the air heavier than the dust around them. Hale reached for one of the oilskin bundles, the motion casual, almost habitual. Elena stepped forward, placing her hand on the corner of the nearest chest. "Do not touch," she said firmly. "This is not a collection for display or profit. It is a record, a responsibility." He paused, a faint chuckle escaping him. "Responsibility? Come now, Miss Marlowe. You underestimate the value of influence. These relics, this book, could alter reputations, scholarship, even power structures. Surely you cannot pretend this is merely academic?" Elena met his eyes, unwavering. She felt the memory of every slight, every dismissive comment, every patronizing smile he had offered in the past. She remembered the graduate student, embarrassed by his arrogance, the anonymous retraction that saved the student's reputation, while his own ego remained bruised. She understood the rhythm of entitlement, the predictable dance of someone who assumed ownership by virtue of title alone. "I am not interested in power," she said. "I am interested in stewardship. If you cannot honor that, then leave." For a moment, Hale's smirk wavered. The room held its breath. Then, smoothly, he reclined against the wall, hands folded behind his head. "Very well," he said, voice neutral, almost admiring. "Let us see what your diligence has produced." His eyes scanned the chamber, the arranged relics, the inscribed book, the meticulously traced symbols. There was no mockery now, only calculation, the cold respect of one realizing his assumptions had been flawed. Elena guided him to the central pedestal. The iron-bound book lay open under her lamp, pages yellowed with age, script precise, illuminated with symbols that whispered secrets across centuries. The Templars were not merely a military order, she explained. They preserved knowledge, religious, political, practical. They hid what they deemed too dangerous for ordinary society. This book contains instructions, locations, and codes. Only a disciplined mind, with patience, respect, and restraint, could understand or protect it. Hale's eyes darkened with both desire and caution. "And you believe yourself qualified?" he asked, tone laced with challenge. Elena nodded. "I have proven my skill in observation, deduction, and preservation. The choice is not arrogance. It is stewardship." For a long moment, he remained silent. Then, slowly, he extended a hand not to seize, but in acknowledgement. "Perhaps," he murmured, "I misjudged you. Perhaps diligence, not position, defines capability." His usual confidence faltered, replaced by the rare admission of respect. Elena allowed herself a faint smile, understanding that moral justice, in its quiet form, had found its moment. Yet she did not let her guard down. The chamber had revealed secrets meant for protection, and she would not yield them lightly. Hale stepped back, hands raised in deference, and for the first time, she saw him not as a rival, but as a witness to the skill, patience, and ethical fortitude that had brought her here. Outside, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the boarded windows, illuminating the dust in the air like tiny golden specks suspended in time. Elena turned to the artifacts, tracing a finger along the lines of the ancient book. She realized then that the chamber had not only tested her intellect but also her integrity, her ability to assert authority without cruelty or arrogance. Hale's voice came softly from the doorway. "You have taught me something today, Miss Marlowe. I will not forget it." Elena did not respond, only nodded, letting her actions speak. Custodianship had been proven, moral justice observed, and the hidden chamber held its secrets safely in the hands of the one who truly deserved them. The chamber revealed more than relics. It revealed choices. Elena traced her fingers over the iron-bound book, scanning passages that described hidden caches, instructions for safe concealment, and annotations by hands long vanished. The Templars had left a meticulous record of guardianship, emphasizing patience, discretion, and the ethical weight of knowledge. Each line spoke not only of secrecy but of the moral imperative to protect, a principle that resonated deeply with her own beliefs. Hale stood a step back, watching her, the usual arrogance tempered by cautious curiosity. "I see why you value this," he said quietly. "It's not just history, it's a code, a testament to vigilance." His voice lacked its former bite, even his pride softened under the gravity of the moment. "I misjudged your capacity for discernment." Elena's gaze shifted to the small chamber shelves. Each container held artifacts wrapped in time's patience, parchments, relics, and instruments whose purpose could be guessed but not fully known. She understood then that these objects were more than treasure, they were responsibility incarnate, each one a test of character. Her own meticulous preparation had brought her here. Her quiet diligence had earned this insight. The professor stepped forward, his eyes scanning the symbols she had traced on paper. He hesitated, realizing that the codes were not merely decorative but intentional, a lattice of information that only a careful, ethical mind could navigate. "I underestimated you," he admitted, the words heavy with sincerity. "Perhaps I allowed my desire for recognition to cloud my judgment. You've proven that patience and integrity are as crucial as skill and intellect." Elena nodded, acknowledging his words but not letting them diminish her authority. "The chamber and its contents are not for personal gain," she said firmly. "They are preserved knowledge, meant to be safeguarded. If we cannot honor that principle, we have no right to access it." Her statement carried both warning and reassurance, a declaration that the mantle of stewardship was earned through moral integrity, not status. A faint draft stirred the parchments, the chamber whispering its age-old secrets. Elena realized the significance of the moment. She had uncovered a legacy, not just of historical artifacts, but of ethical vigilance, a code that demanded more than curiosity. She could feel the weight of centuries pressing on her shoulders, a responsibility both daunting and exhilarating. Hale, now silent, absorbed the scene, the realization settling that his ambition had been checked, tempered by the librarian's steadfast resolve. He stepped back, letting her occupy the moral high ground, recognizing that her measured courage and discernment had brought them here safely. The room, filled with the aura of centuries, seemed to acknowledge her mastery over both the discovery and its ethical management. Elena turned one final time to the iron-bound book. She traced the embossed symbols with reverence, understanding that the chamber's contents would guide her choices in the weeks to come. The Templar legacy of discretion, patience, and ethical vigilance had become her own, intertwined with her quiet dedication and skill. In that chamber, hidden from the world, she had become the rightful custodian of knowledge that could alter perceptions if wielded wisely. The professor's voice finally broke the silence. "I will support your custody of this discovery," he said, a rare deference in his tone. "I now understand that stewardship, not recognition, defines true scholarship." Elena allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. Justice, patience, and moral integrity had been vindicated. She had claimed her place, not through title or rank, but through quiet, unwavering dedication to truth and preservation. Weeks passed, and the city moved on, oblivious to the quiet victory that had taken place beneath the shuttered windows of St. Severin's. Elena returned to the library each day, her routine unchanged outwardly, but inwardly she carried a secret knowledge that weighed both heavily and lightly. The iron-bound book, the parchments, the hidden chamber, these were her responsibility now, her guardianship, her moral triumph. The Professor, Hale, had kept his word. He assisted only when requested, never overstepping, a shadow of respect replacing his former arrogance. Together, they verified the authenticity of the relics, logged their findings meticulously, and ensured that the Templar codes remained safeguarded, inaccessible to those who would exploit them. Every step reinforced Elena's belief that knowledge, when handled with integrity, was a power far greater than fame or recognition. Elena's reputation in the library and among scholarly circles quietly shifted. Whispers of her discovery circulated in muted tones, stories of her diligence and ethical vigilance seeping into the corridors of academia. Yet she remained humble, her focus on preservation and stewardship unwavering. The hidden drawer, once an unnoticed flaw in an old desk, had become the doorway to a legacy she alone could protect. She often revisited the chamber, alone, tracing her fingers along the symbols and inscriptions, reminding herself of the lessons learned: patience, attention to detail, and unwavering moral responsibility. The Templars had entrusted her with their secrets, not for glory, but for the careful and judicious stewardship of knowledge. Every decision she made thereafter was informed by this profound understanding. Months later, the library hosted a quiet exhibition on historical preservation, showcasing Elena's meticulous documentation of the St. Severin's relics without revealing their true nature. Scholars admired her rigor, unaware of the magnitude of what had been safeguarded. Elena watched them, a serene smile on her face, knowing that the greatest discoveries often remained hidden, protected by those willing to bear their weight with integrity. In her personal reflections, she realized that the chamber had not only tested her intellect, but also her character. The experience had transformed her, reinforcing the truth that true mastery was measured not by recognition, but by the courage to protect what is valuable, the wisdom to act judiciously, and the humility to remain unseen when necessary. She had become more than a librarian. She had become a custodian of history itself. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories about how extraordinary people turn humiliation into triumph. Elena Marlowe's quiet triumph would remain her own, a testament to the enduring power of patience, diligence, and moral integrity. The hidden drawer had been the key, but her steadfast heart had unlocked the true lesson that knowledge entrusted to the right hands could reshape understanding, not through spectacle, but through careful, conscientious guardianship.